welcome to Reanimated. This is the podcast about zombies and undeath and vampires, but it's not that intense, you guys, so just chill out about it. I'm Stuart, and with me is H.A. Conrad from New York.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey.
That sounds like Christopher Walken. I guess he has a New York accent.
He's got a weird accent. I don't know what it is.
Something East Coasty.
Yeah.
But we're not going to dwell on that because he's never done a zombie picture as far as I know. But, so hey, we're here. We're switching gears this week. We were doing The Passage. We did the first 3 episodes, and today we're going to switch over to Kingdom because that show, you'll see as we get into it. It's been good. It's been good for us. But before we get there, we're going to have a little bit of news to talk about. So the first thing is something that I think I knew in the back of my head that this was coming, that Taika Waititi, is that his name?
I believe so.
Yeah, New Zealand director of Thor Ragnarok and What We Do in the Shadows, the film, is also making a TV series, What We Do in the Shadows. So, pretty exciting. Have we ever talked about this movie?
I think we've talked about it, but not on our
Yeah, we never
cast.
reviewed it because I feel like maybe it's always felt a little too goofy for us even.
Yeah.
But we should at some point. But either way, there's a trailer out for What We Do in the Shadows, the TV show. And I think it's delightfully silly in the same vein as the film was, even though it's a completely different cast.
And I think, so I think I'm excited about this. I really love the trailer for this. It's honestly hilarious. And, you know, I'm really into the Flight of the Conchords type of sense of humor, and we saw actually some of that in Thor Ragnarok. So I'm excited to see this, but I guess my question is does this have the chops to kind of keep going, or does it sort of just become like a it's sort of like the same kind of sense of humor, but I think I'm cool with this. I laughed like maniacally while watching the trailer, so yeah. I think it should be good.
Flight of the Conchord managed to put out, I think, like 20 or 30 different episodes before they stopped. And so if you can manage that, that's a show. That's something you can be proud of and put on your mantle, whatever one does. Yep. So, I'd say this is going to be great. And I think it's awesome that this director who got so big after Thor Ragnarok and everybody wanted a piece of him is coming back to TV, which is like shows an amount of humility and an amount of willingness to do passion projects still that I think speaks well of him. Other
really big news, though, I don't think that people should be surprised by this piece at all, given her level of activity. She's been doing a lot of stuff lately, but Danai Gurira is leaving The Walking Dead. And, you know, Maggie, the character of Maggie, is also leaving, so there's a lot of stuff. Rick Grimes left. And for a lot, I mean, look, this is a haul. This is a long haul for a show that I don't think anybody anticipated having sort of the longevity and the legs that it did. So I think she's been focusing on a ton of other projects. We've seen her obviously in the Black Panther, the movie, but also some of the Avengers stuff. She's been producing a ton of stuff with other people, and I get that this would be really tough to do if you are involved in a show as intense as The Walking Dead. So they are talking about her exit, and also not a big surprise is that she will be involved in some of the feature films that Andrew Lincoln will be involved in that they announced upon his exit. So really what you're looking at is just the characters of Daryl and Carol left on the show as the original cast members. But apparently they have also signed up to do some crossovers with Fear the Walking Dead. And
what?
I guess
I did not know that. They've signed up to do crossovers?
Apparently there is something in their contracts where they're going to be I don't know if they will make good on it, but apparently they can potentially make some appearances on those shows. So on that show. So that will be interesting to see.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So apparently they are all in terms of the show franchise, and I would imagine.
Think for a minute, like how many shows that have the good fortune to go 10 years have you seen like mass exodus of the cast from? Like I'm thinking about 2.5 Men. You had some of those people just stuck with it for the duration. There was some turnover too. and also some crazy people. But like it seems a little bit like biting the hand that feeds you, maybe, or not. I don't know. Like maybe these actors are just like, I'm so shit hot that I can go on and do anything else with my career, so I'm going to.
So normally, I think when you see an exodus like this, I think typically the decision is to end the series, and they're not going to do that here. Obviously, it's making too much money for them, and they feel like there's more. I feel like there's more runway to go, and they're gonna probably, unfortunately, I think, drive it into the ground. But maybe not. Maybe we will see something interesting, and I don't know that I've ever seen anything quite like this, though, with the feature films. And usually those kinds of things happen when, say, a series ends prematurely, like you saw it with Firefly, and also, well, I guess not quite with Veronica Mars, although because that did have like it had a little bit of a run, but they did a film with that. Usually see it because they weren't necessarily able to wrap up storylines. Versus
and Sense8, actually, another title which is related to Kingdom, which we'll be talking about today.
Right.
Sense8 ran on Netflix for 2 seasons before it got canceled, and then it came back and did a film to tie up the loose ends of the story, which
right.
Usually that's why you need to do that. And in this case, they're just spinning it off because, hey, more money. They don't really need to...
more money, but also I think that these actors they still like the franchise. It's just they probably just don't have the time, or they want to focus on other projects and things like that. So I get that, and they don't want to necessarily let them go. And if they're on board, I get doing this, but this does seem to me, this seems like a lot. So. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm sad to see the character of Michonne leaving. She's a key character. She's been there and very cool all on, despite some things that the writers have done with her. And I really love this actor. So I'm glad to see she is continuing on, at least in some capacity. But I'm also very excited to see what else she does, because I think she's quite talented. So I'm really going to be on the lookout for her other projects. And do you want to grab the next one?
Yeah, sure. That is still news to shake your bones, but okay. In other news, The Kingdom's been not only approved for second season, not The Kingdom, but Kingdom, the Korean zombie show that we are reviewing today. But it's also started production in February. Now they are working on season 2. It's a fairly short run. Season 1 was only 6 episodes, but it has done very well critically, and they are filming new episodes for the second season, and that's awesome news. And I think the plan, as I mentioned before on this show, was based on stuff I've read, is only to do 2 seasons, and so it will not get bloated, and it will not go the way of Walking Dead for sure. So it'll be cool to see how they...
I should point out, though, that these are hour-long episodes apiece, so it's really not a short... I see why, and they are very involved. The level of detail, the sets, the costumes, the choreography, all of that stuff, just the sheer amount of extras that they need for these films is kind of insane. So I can see why they might want to limit it to 2 seasons. I also think, given the storyline, they kind of have to. And I think I actually enjoy that self-contained story, and I'm glad that they've made the decision to do this. Generally, I like what typically the BBC has done in the past, and I think I like that model where they just make sure that it's a self-contained story and they end it there. So I'm glad to see that
the BBC version of this is that they'll do like a 4-episode season, and then they'll stop for 2 years, and then they'll come back with more, and it's all over the map as far as when they're actually going to produce episodes. But this one is at least on a pretty fast track. So, but yeah, I agree. Each episode is very rich production. We'll get into more of that when we talk about the show.
In the review.
But it's already spinning up for season 2, which is good news.
Right. Next up is the Netflix Dracula series, which also, speaking of BBC series, this one in particular has involvement with Stephen Moffat of Doctor Who and Sherlock fame, and it looks kind of cool, or the idea of it looks kind of cool.
There's very little detail here. It's just...
Well, other than that, it's a Dracula series with Stephen Moffat.
Yeah.
I like Moffat. I think that quite honestly, like some of the better Doctor Who capsule episodes are his work. I did notice with the Sherlock series and even with Doctor Who that he kind of goes off the rails a little bit when he has a longer runway in terms of storytelling, and there tends to be episodes that I deem as sort of filler, and they don't do anything in terms of character development. And he sometimes gets into the weeds, so hopefully that won't be the case for this.
There's one quote in this story here from comicbook.com that ran this story. So it's a collaboration between Netflix and BBC. And the one thing that does seem to be maybe the philosophy that they're going for is Moffat is quoted, and Gaddis, his co-creator. There have always been stories about great evil. What's special about Dracula is that Bram Stoker gave evil its own hero. So we might be looking at, I assume we're going to be looking at like an anti-hero story focused on Dracula as like the trials and tribulations of being a great evil vampire.
Well, and look, Gaddis, and I should have mentioned Gaddis too, because he's also involved. He was involved in Doctor Who, though not quite. Like he also was like he acted in it here and there, but certainly he was very involved in Sherlock. He I think that they do a good job at the anti-hero, because Sherlock in the series that they came up with is definitely not totally. He is not always a likable character. In fact, he's a little bit of a sociopath. So maybe we see Dracula as a sociopath. Who knows? Maybe as a victim, who knows? Like we'll see what they do with it. But I'm okay with that pairing. I like what they do generally, and so I think it'll probably be interesting regardless. Do
you recognize any of these cast members that they're talking about being? They've identified 3 people so far. Claes Bang, a Danish, I think, actor, who I don't know that I've seen him in much before. He was in The Girl in the Spider's Web. John Heffernan, which name that also sounds familiar. He was in The Crown, which I have watched.
And then there's somebody else from Luther in it, I think. Stephen Rose.
Regardless, it'll be really interesting to see this come together. I think this is a very early days sort of announcement, so there's probably going to be more details forthcoming as they get into production.
I mean, I was really hoping they were going to announce that Tom Waits would be part of this production, because, he was in that movie, but, can't have everything.
Wait, which movie was he in?
The Dracula with Gary Oldman.
I forgot.
And Winona Ryder and Keanu Reeves. It was like in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that film, but I don't remember Tom Waits having a role.
Oh, yeah, he's the familiar. He's, what's his face? The one that kind of goes crazy.
He's the one in the insane asylum.
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
That was actually some pretty good acting from Tom Waits.
He's a pretty good actor. I highly recommend him, and he's like in this other movie, which is a little bit weird and disturbing, but it's called, I think, Wrist Cutters.
That doesn't sound weird or disturbing. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's quite disturbing. Anyway, but I digress. But let's see what happens with it. I'm curious to see what they do. I'm excited to see them working on new projects, and I would assume we will review it once it comes out. Last up, some kind of not unexpected news, at least as far as I thought, given the delays in it, but it looks like, unfortunately, World War Z, the sequel, they have pulled the plug on it. And so this was the sequel to World War Z, which starred Brad Pitt, and David Fincher was attached to the sequel. And unfortunately, and he had been brought in to, I think, do cleanup in the first one, correct?
I don't recall. It was a mess. That whole thing was a mess.
It was a total mess. And they had to reshoot and redo some storylines. Apparently, they just feel like it is been a little bit too long. They really...
I don't think there's any detail that we can really take away from this other than the fact that pre-production has stopped. Like, that's all you really know. And then this article from IO9 goes into a lot of speculation about like whether or not it really means it's stopped, and whether or not it might start again, and we don't really know any of the answers to that.
There's been a couple of other articles. I chose this one because I think but basically it would be very hard to restart this. But I saw in other places that Brad Pitt is pretty pissed about it.
I'm sure
and
this
David
has been
Fincher,
a huge disappointment for him in his career. Is like he wanted He wanted the first movie, and it came out and it was full of problems, and now the second one, I would be pissed off too.
Yep. But anyway, if it comes back to life, we'll let you know. But so to speak. But for now, I would say it's probably done for the moment. But I think I am really excited to jump into talking about Kingdom. Yep. Do you want to kick us off?
Of course, always love kicking things. Hey guys, don't listen to this if you haven't seen Kingdom yet, because we're gonna spoil the hell out of it.
Woo.
I always call it the Kingdom. Terrible.
Yeah, I know everybody does, but it's Kingdom.
Kingdom, based on a webcomic called Kingdom of the Gods, not of the dead, but of the gods. This is a 6-episode run for season 1 that focuses on the Joseon period of medieval Korea and the royal family.
17th century.
Oh, thank you. I did not know when that was. Cool. That's good. 17th century. That's not so far back. Curious. Mm-hmm. And the story focuses for now on the adventures of the Crown Prince, Yi Chang. The names. Oh, let's talk really quickly and do disclaimers about how I don't speak Korean and have no idea how to pronounce things. And HA, I assume, is also not good at it.
I am not.
Okay. The place names in this.
We will do our best, and apologies in advance. Yeah. I did look up how to pronounce some of these names, and I am probably not going to be successful. So apologies to anybody who does speak Korean. Feel free to email us your anger, I guess.
I studied Chinese in college, so I have a handle on Chinese, but I've never touched Korean, and frankly, I'm pretty ignorant about the language. So, yes, my apologies too. And so the character is of Yi Chang is the Crown Prince, and he is our hero, kind of like, without any equivocation. He's the hero of this first season. There's a couple of others in there too, and those are played by so he is played by Ju Ji-hoon is Yi Chang, and then Cob is the nurse, and she is played by Bae Do-na, who is recognizable, I think, most on this whole cast because she is like a Wachowski brother favorite. She was in Cloud Atlas and a few other things, and she was also in Sense8, that TV show the show from Netflix that I referred to earlier. So she actually has acted in English. This whole show, of course, is in Korean, but is available to listen to dubbed or with subtitles. And this is another interesting point, HA, and I think that you should weigh in on this too. How did you watch it?
I watched it on my laptop.
What language did you watch it in?
Oh, it didn't really give me a choice. It was overdubbed in English.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't have a choice to do it in another language. I'll be honest with you, I probably would have preferred, I usually, for foreign films, I tend to prefer subtitles. Yeah. Because I do think, although I do think the overdubbing is interesting to listen to, but I feel like there's it's interesting, some of the phrasing and things like that. There are, for any language, there are some things that translate and some things that don't. In terms of concepts and inflection and things like that. So I much prefer subtitled films generally. But I definitely didn't have the option here for anything. I
did both.
Did you have Wait, so did you watch it on Netflix?
Yeah. That's the only place it is. Huh. So when you go into the little subtitle button, you can pick from multiple languages as far as subtitles go, and as far as the language goes. Let me quickly pull that up and see what other options there were. So yes, you can listen to it in English, Spanish, French, Korean original, Mandarin, or Korean audio description, which I think is for where they say what the people are doing, like what actions they're doing. And then subtitles are in English, Korean, Spanish, Chinese, simplified, and traditional Chinese, which is, wow. They really wanted this to work in China.
Well, I have to say, I may have to rewatch with it being subtitled, because that just, I feel like there's just something, I like hearing the language a little bit more. Yeah. And honestly, to me, it adds something.
The English overdub and the subtitles actually differed quite significantly. If you listened to the
I would imagine.
English audio and with the English subtitles on, they were not saying the same things, which was sometimes kind of confusing. And also, I would say that the English overdub, I don't know if it was recorded by the same actors, but there are some pretty strong accents, which also makes it a little bit difficult to understand.
I didn't find it difficult. I actually thought they did a great job, but I was worried about what you were just talking about, which is that there's a difference in meaning and a difference in what the dialogue is, because that can give you an entirely different concept of what they're doing in the show.
Yeah, and because there was that difference between the dub and the subtitles, I have some concern that there was a fair amount of context getting left behind.
Right, and that's what I always worry about. But anyway.
But so yeah, I did it.
Until I learned to speak Korean, I guess we just have to deal with it.
Yeah.
So
I did it both ways. When I was really focusing on the show, and I have watched the entire series, and so have you. But when there's some episodes where I was kind of double screening it, and then I would put it in English so I could just hear what everybody was saying. And there were some times when I had all of my attention focused on it, and then I would have it in Korean with the subtitles. So I kind of went back and forth as I watched it. And I would say, yeah, probably the better experience is listening to it in Korean. You get more of the inflection of the actors' voices. You're certain in that case that it's coming across as the original, right? Whether or not you can really read a lot into that if you don't have any idea what the language is. There's at least some tone there.
Thank you for letting me know that. I never would have known otherwise. I was actually... I did note, like, when it just started playing sort of the way it did, I just didn't think, I was like, oh, I guess this is how they wanted to present it on Netflix. So it didn't occur to me that there was, like, other things to do with it. But it's interesting that it just automatically chose that as the format. So
I don't remember what the default was. I assume maybe it was English for me too. But because I'm always really picky about how I am watching stuff, because I almost always pull up subtitles to watch stuff now.
Me too.
I was looking at the options, so.
Anyway, okay, well, cool.
So other cast members, just to get this out of the way, I think we're probably going to refer to the cast members by what their job is as opposed to their name.
Their names, okay.
Because so you'll have Crown Prince,
Yep, we have the Crown Prince. We have the sort of the King's Counselor, Cho Hak-ju,
and that's played by Ryu Seung-ryong.
And he is like a veteran actor. You've probably seen him in a ton of stuff if you've watched any Korean films. But also he's in some American things too as well. I think
I've never seen him. I don't think I have.
And then we've got Seo-bi, who's the nurse, and who we just mentioned. And then there is Yun Shin, who is like sort of this character is the sort of, I don't want to say everyman, but is that.
He's like the everyman who's also a elite soldier.
Badass, a badass elite soldier.
Yeah.
But he got there because he was the everyman, and I would say he is the voice of the oppressed people coming back to scream in the face of the nobles, basically.
Yeah.
So he has peasant background.
Yeah, and
went off, became an elite soldier, and now is a bit of a rebellion pot stirrer.
He speaks truth to power and generally pays for it. And we don't really know any of his backstory in episodes 1 and 2, other than the fact that his actions speak louder than words, maybe. So then Moo Young is the Crown Prince's bodyguard. And
he's the comic relief.
And also a badass. Like, it's kind of an interesting combo. He's played by Kim Sang-ho, and I really enjoy his performance. He's good.
Yep.
Then the rest of these, I don't know that we. I guess Cho Byum-il is he the magistrate from Dongnae?
I think so. Yeah.
Maybe.
And then there's also the
queen.
The queen.
She's a piece of work.
She's an interesting piece of work. So we'll see. And and then there is the I don't know that it's listed in the main, like, I'm sure it's in the full cast, whatever, but there's also the physician, and he plays a pretty big role in all of this,
You mean in episode 2?
Yeah.
Doctor.
Well, I mean, they reference him a lot, and also we
Yeah.
see, there's references to this particular character quite a few
Yeah.
times. And it is a vast cast, so
there's a lot of moving pieces for sure.
There are a lot of pieces here. So, but that's sort of a base that we can jump into here. And later on, we do have the character that is basically like the wise counselor to the crown prince, who's sort of like, it was his. I don't want to call him like the tutor role, but he is sort of this powerful character.
Oh, that's way later in the season.
Way later, but
Yeah.
I mentioned him only because there's definitely sort of like, even in naming all of these characters, there's sort of tropes and ideas. Interestingly enough, though, they got the idea for this whole story out of real historical records and then turned it into like a zombie thing, which is interesting.
Well, if this has any basis in historical truth, I think that is awesome, because frankly, it's 2 stories, right? Like you just said, we've got political intrigue on the one hand, and then we've got zombie story on the other. But the political intrigue version of this is a really compelling story, and it's something that I feel
even without the zombie
hell yeah,
piece.
it's a beautiful period piece about something that I don't know much about, frankly. And I could watch an entire show just about the Crown Prince and his struggles with the Cho Haewon clan. Which is okay. So yeah, you've got the Chang family, which is the Crown Prince and his dad, the king, and then you've got the is that right, Cho Haewon, something like that. They're the antagonist family, who are a very powerful faction in the kingdom,
right?
And that's kind of the basis of the tension for the beginning of this show. But that by itself is so good.
And just to give you sort of apparently Kim Yoon-hee found this sort of like a record, like in annals, like I guess not quite like the Doomsday Book that often people reference, because this was actually just like a storytelling thing. But basically, there was a plague that made its way throughout this particular part of the country, and it began to spread, and like tens of thousands of people died.
Oh boy!
So basically, he kind of turned this into the way of putting a spin on this record, and he also, like, some of the things to do with the kingdom and the different levels of the society. I think he does a great job, like taking the zombie specific piece out of it, talking about the difference in the classes and the suffering that your everyman or your lower classes had to deal with, and the sort of I don't think it's any mistake that he made this today, given all the focus on the differences economically in our society. So I think that's certainly something that he's getting at here. But just talking about people being hunger, like having there be a famine.
Well, we have yet to see a Korean project, zombie or otherwise, that isn't laden with subtext and social commentary, right? So honestly, the genre just fits really well in, I feel like, with creative Korean storytelling, because they love to tell stories against these kind of backdrops. Right.
So anyway, we've got these sort of imperial family, so to speak, and there's lots going on there. The biggest sort of political piece is that the king has not been seen. We know he's ill. Supposedly he has smallpox. We have his son, the prince, who basically, he's a prince, but we find out through like just interactions and things that he's saying that he is prince, but he is the son of a concubine, so not technically part of the royal pairing. So he is
technically the heir to the throne.
He is, but he is not, like, so supposedly
born out of wedlock. So
Yeah, so he's born out of wedlock. He's not part of like the direct marriage, the direct coupling, which there is a lot of antagonism between him and his stepmother. She is blocking access to the king.
She might be younger than him. It's hard to say, but she's very young.
And there's also the main king's counselor, who is her father.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely intrigue here. There is a power struggle. Clearly, she is trying, like, so the whole thing, and this is the basis of what's going on here, is that if the king is not dead, they can't move on to the next heir, which would be the prince. But she, the current queen, is pregnant. So if she has a son, then that son is the direct line.
Yeah. And that means that the crown prince has to be put to death, which is a pretty harsh reality that he's lived with apparently his entire life. And the show does go into that more as the season goes on. But in this episode, we're basically faced with how little power he has, although he also leads this very like protected life, and he has servants, and he has a guard. And he talks about having gone through some adversity in these first 2 episodes. And that's something you're like, oh, really? Because it doesn't seem like you have. But then we get to know more and more about it.
We get to know more about it, but we also see what other people in this kingdom are dealing with. So it's and how protected from the suffering of the people he really is.
This is a cool thing about this show. Like the way that they present he's a hero. And that's not really up for discussion. Like, he's a hero, but he's also pretty haughty. He makes terrible jokes in episode 2. And, and the acting for this guy, it plays a really good line between, like, shock and horror, because it's a horror show at the end of the day. And also this, like, aloofness that he has, and this obligation, this duty, this royal, like, he's actually, like, one of the coolest royal... I mean, he's very archetypal. He's kind of he's heroic, but he also has these flaws, and so I kind of enjoy the way that they've put this character together.
Right, and he has flaws, and we watch his evolution, so to speak, as he sees more and more of what's really out there, and what the people are going through, and so he does evolve and change in a way that and they show his flaws in a way that they don't often show in other places when they're trying to sort of build up a heroic character. Usually it's like, oh, he's this leader with a heart of gold, and you see that from the beginning, and that's not what they do with him. They make him like kind of an immature brat to some extent.
Yeah, distant and not cool.
And just really tone deaf, and they take that and they make him evolve throughout the show, and it's kind of a cool thing that they do with him. And so, but in addition to his sort of trials and political struggles and power struggles within this kingdom, you also have the scholars, and these are kind of philosophers. These are another faction, and they are basically, they want the prince to be their king. They don't really trust the king's consort, and they don't trust her father. They do have a suspicion about what's happening with the king, and have been basically putting out different, as always, different leaflets and things like that, talking about the fact that they think that the king is dead, and that the crown prince should be put in his place. There's some pretty brutal scenes, like where you see the absolute power of the imperial regime, and really, I guess it's the power of the king's main counselor, because there's this whole scene where they have their basically their investigation squad or whatever they have, and they have brought in all these scholars, and they're torturing
89 they're just torturing 89 people together in like a big open courtyard.
horrifically, and they're trying to get them to admit, and basically their end game here is that they're trying to get them to admit that the crown prince is the root of this, so that they can basically say that he's treasonous, and that he is the one that he is trying to overthrow the king, that he can't wait, that he's impatient, and this is the sort of narrative they're trying to put in place. And
it's important to point out that this would be a false testimony, because the crown prince has, he's just been kneeling out in the rain in front of his dad's stepmom's house asked to try and get permission to go visit his dying father
right.
for several days. Like he has no part in any
of this,
any kind of rebellion sowing. Although he does admit later that he had thought about it in his heart, which makes him feel like he's guilty anyway. But that's pretty dumb.
But this is also where we get introduced to Yunshin, who is our other heroic character, but also flawed, definitely. He is our sharpshooting elite soldier, like rebellion rabble-rouser.
I mean, in
person.
episode 1, he's just a rabble-rouser. He's a rabble-rouser.
Well, we find out more.
Who can handle himself. But honestly, in episode 1, you don't even see him fight anybody. All he does is something horrible.
Stir up.
He talks trash to COB a lot and says all these people are going to die anyway, because this is also taking place at this hospital.
After they've been tortured.
Out in the country. I don't know that these guys. I think this is way south. This is like days travel away from Hanyang, which is modern day Seoul, in the show. And these guys are just like living the life outside of the capital, which means they don't have any food. And
they're basically, the rabble rousing. But here's the thing, and this is why it's sort of genius. So the horrible thing that he does, which I will let you get into, but you understand why he does it.
Yes.
And he's very clear why he does it. And basically there's a lot of talk. So it's interesting. One of the things that they do with this show that is so interesting is showing the different strata of this society. Yeah. And they do it they do it through many mechanisms. One is that the costuming of the imperial society, of the royal society, the nobles, is so drastically different from, and I mean, you would expect that, but in this particular period piece, you have anybody who is like of noble descent or in this higher echelon of society, they are wearing like very elaborate, expensive costumes of silk. They have these like super crazy hats usually, and these like, and that's the thing, is that the detail of this show is so incredible. It's really beautiful. So the sets are beautiful, and even where you see these staged, so the whole set where the royal palace is just so gorgeous and clean and pristine, just absolutely beautiful. And then when you switch over to where the hospital is, you see people just living in squalor. They are in basically just sort of like very simple clothing, rags. They are dirty, like very dirty, including even, the nurses who are supposed to be helping them. I mean, they're working hard. It's very clear that these people are struggling.
But they're wearing, the nurses are at least wearing these uniforms with like a splash of color on them. But yeah, it's very clear that the peasants are all wearing just like off-white rags and have things tied around their heads, and their hair is often like disheveled, whereas
matted.
whereas by comparison, the royal family has their hair in these like really elaborate bun things made of metal on top of their heads, like these top knots with dragons and stuff on them. And then so they do paint very clear pictures of the various factions, and later on those costume decisions expand into other areas, which are also really cool. But it is immediately apparent when you're looking at nobility versus peasantry, and that does help tell the story that they're trying to tell.
And then the zombie piece that we get into, like, so we have all these stories going on, which are basically the stories of the different classes and the gap between them and the struggle. Like the famine piece is very real. So you have Yunshin talking about, and the nurse talking about how people haven't had anything to eat, and then in a large piece of this is that the nobility has been quite greedy. They've asked for a lot of taxes. They actually get sort of a take of all the crops, and apparently they took everything, or just about everything, and haven't been distributing to any of the. So we're talking about people that are really hungry. And so on top of all of this, which is the big twist, or the obviously the where we get into the zombie piece, is the king scene, which is really, I mean, I don't think it's a surprise to get to it. They do a great job in terms of the Cloak and Dagger where they do the reveal. But they keep it mysterious, even though we know as zombie fans obviously what's happening.
And we've seen the trailers for this show, which was always it was always about the king being a zombie, right? Like we always kind of knew that.
But it's what I find so interesting about it. So the scene in which we kind of see a little bit of this going on, we have the physician come in with his assistant. And he basically says, "Don't look at the king." And of course, you have the little foreboding music going on and whatever. But this is the thing, that this society is so, and we have seen this out of deference, like to what the Queen consort wants and things like that. That you're basically so lowly that you aren't supposed to be looking at him because he's sick, maybe, and only the physician can. But obviously, the physician has a different reason for not wanting him to look at him. So I guess my question for you, Stuart, and I still wonder, was his intention that this assistant get killed by the king?
No, I don't think so. This guy was a member of his hospital staff. He appears to be very contrite and unhappy when he returns to the hospital with this guy Dan E's body, and no.
Because that was, I guess, later on they do talk a little bit about. So the whole sort of basis is that the physician has basically reanimated the king using this plant. And apparently in the past when he has used it, it hasn't had quite this effect. That was sort of my understanding. Or maybe it did. Maybe you weren't supposed to be dead.
We still
I don't know.
Well,
but
this is something that is unclear to the end of the first season. We'll find out because there are indications that we'll get more of this backstory next season, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So,
but that was sort of puzzling to me. Okay, I wasn't totally sure. I thought that was the case, but so
it can be a little confusing because the Chohae-Wan clan then does start to feed servants and people to the zombie king later on. But I think in this case that was not the intention.
Okay. So basically, the king totally destroys this kid,
and he's apparently not chained down. Like I think this comes to us as a surprise to the Doctor that.
Okay.
The way this unfolds, otherwise, why would he have him unchained? Because for the rest of the show, the king is chained.
He's chained.
And, and that's also kind of goes towards why is the king wandering around the palace when the crown prince sneaks into the palace? Like,
True.
It makes it, maybe we'll find that this is like a plot hole as we go further down the show because there is some understanding that this has happened before with other people and that they should have some working knowledge of how zombies work and what they have to do to them to keep them out of harm's way.
Yeah. And so, so this kid gets destroyed. There's some really great, just sort of, they have the great use of these screens, which are supposed to kind of shield the king from the eye of people that give him privacy or whatever. And this kid just gets totally pulled, under.
It's a great scene. It's a great way to start off the show. It's one of the first seasons of the show. And we start right off with zombies, which is great, and then they kind of back away from that and do all the political intrigue for a while, and then we come back to zombies. It's
it's really good.
It is really interesting too mechanically, and we'll talk about this more as we get further into the season. But so the king kills this kid Danny, and then Doctor what's his name takes him back to Dongne. This is the region where his hospital is. His hospital is called Jiul Hyun. God, I know it doesn't sound anything like the way they say it in the show, but that's like his little compound hospital where the nurse and the vagrant miscreant rabble-rouser are, and that's kind of
Yun Sheen.
That's basically in this first episode. He arrives back. He's got a coffin. He's like, prepare for a funeral. It's so weird that all the people in this hospital are like, let's see who's in the coffin, and they open it up, and Danny is there, and he's totally torn up, and everybody's like, oh, this is so sad. What happened?
Yep. And the doctor's pretty silent about that.
The doctor goes into seclusion, and there's some mistakes were made, and clearly this is a huge mistake because it turns into something that nobody had seen before. This is a guy who has experience with the resurrection plant and what it does to people, but he has not seen what happens next, which is the nurses are out gathering herbs to feed or do perform medical treatments on their patients, and while they're out, Yangshin just cooks.
I think it's Yangshin.
Yangshin, he cooks Danny, and chops him up, puts him in the big stew bowl, and feeds everybody. And by the time COB and her friend, whose name I forget, get back to the hospital. Everybody is, and they're doing one of these scenes where they're showing people eat with such abandon and
I
gusto that
know.
you're like,
Well, and that's the thing, is that they're hungry, and so this is what I was saying before, is that you can excuse Yun Shin, and it is horrific, but you can understand when you're seeing like children starving and whatever, and he's basically like, he gets chastised by the nurse, and she's Shobi, and she's like horrified, but and she doesn't actually eat it because she has dropped her, how she figures it out is that she drops her little, or some little thing of the stew, and there's like a finger in there
with Danny's distinctive like fingernail discoloration on it. Yeah,
right. And so she yells at Yun Shin, and he's kind of like, well, people have been starving, this is what we've learned to do, so this is not just this one time.
Yeah, he's been a cannibal for a while.
But you, like, given the level of starvation, you can understand why he got there. And I will say that in terms of turning and learning about whatever this mythology is, they do a stellar job here.
Oh yeah,
like, it's,
of course, man. This is like Train to Busan level of extra acting all over again. These guys,
man, these extras.
themselves.
I have to tell you, like, I know that they do, obviously they speed up and they do a couple of things like with the camera and with effects, but some of this is just, these people are amazing, and
they're willing to just...
these extras are phenomenal. And I was just, there's a whole scene where they really intro this, and we see whatever this is starting to take effect, mainly with the companion nurse. I also apologize, I don't remember her name, but she's, she sees it with these, and they do it with these kids. So
this show is not shy about children and putting them through some stuff. We don't get too much of it in the first 2 episodes, other than there are children that we see die after eating the stew, but I don't think we see a lot of zombie kids.
Right, but this, episodes. I mean. But so this kid, we see it start to take effect. Like, so the main thing is, this stew is so delicious. And then the kid starts to like retch, and then everybody starts retching, at least in the room that she's in. Mm-hmm. And we see whatever this is take effect. And it's a little bit Exorcist in the way that the body is contorted. It's sort of like full flexion of muscles, like just full contracting and bending the spine in a way that is totally unnatural. Like, we see the hands and the feet all just kind of completely flexed in unnatural directions.
I get Charlie horses just watching these scenes. I'm just like, oh my god, this would make me so... this is so painful.
It looks ridiculously uncomfortable. She does what any nurse would do, because she sees this one patient. It looks like he's having a seizure, so like he's foaming at the mouth. So she puts something in his mouth so that he's not going to bite on himself, which of course we're like, oh god, he wanted to bite her. But it protects her from being bitten. But of course, right behind her is another patient, and ultimately she gets taken down by this entire room of infected. And
meanwhile,
that particular scene,
go ahead.
That when they all jump on her is so disturbing and creepy, and like, it's done so well. And I mean, it's not, look, we've seen sort of similar pig piles of zombies like this.
But this one is framed like out of a webcomic, and I wonder if that's from the original.
It looks like that to me. I mean, the visual is really interesting. And they really just seem like they've been totally taken over. And then you've got the flash, because Shobi's been yelling at Yun Shin about all of this, and then the way that they get brought into it for the end of the first episode is amazing.
It's a little that's.
It's very comic booky though. I mean, it's
they hear noises, they start to investigate. Then there's just blood running down a door, and that's kind of where we leave their story.
Right, but there's this great, like, the thing I love is the shot where it's like they can kind of see a little bit between the doors, so they kind of see, they don't even know what they're seeing, because like, why would you think that this would be something you'd be seeing? And of course, where's that, like, the blood coming right out of the door, like, oh, okay,
not sure where that blood is coming from.
Right.
So that's
that was a great.
That's kind of episode 1 though. It kind of ends there, and then episode 2, we know that the Crown Prince and his bodyguard, by the way, have been doing stuff in episode 1. They've been trying to find out what's going on with the king. So the Crown Prince sneaks into the palace. He gets Mu Young, his bodyguard, to go and steal the medical ledger, which is how they figure out that this physician is the last person to treat him. And so they're like, oh, he's from Dongnei. Okay, we're going to go there. Like through the course of this episode, they go into like the hovels of the capital and interview people. And that's where you see the crown prince kind of like being uncomfortable. And later on, his bodyguard accuses him of being soft and saying like, you can't be out here on the road. You threw up so many times just from being in the slums. So we get more of that kind of character development. But by the end of episode 1, he's like, all right, I'm going to go to Dongnei. We're going to have to ride and go there. Right. And even though this basically paints him as a traitor.
They also have an ulterior motive for going there. And this is they clearly need to get away from the palace.
I don't think they realize how badly they need to get away when they leave. By the end of episode 1, the Cho Hae-won clan has branded him a traitor. Yep. And are searching for him to arrest him and probably execute him. But they don't know that necessarily. Like he senses some danger. He doesn't know exactly what it is. I think the biggest thing is that the physicians are supposed to keep these daily logs for his father's health. And so that's the thing, is that there's missing stuff. They see that this physician is the last person to have seen him, and they want him to fill in the gaps. Yeah. Plus, he's seen his evil father running around who smells like a corpse, and he's like, something is wrong. Oh, yeah, really? Like, no kidding, man. It's interesting that they don't show at all how the palace guards get the king back to his bed. In that scene, there's just a light that goes off, a very silent capturing of a zombie, I would say. If like in that scene where he's like looking at the silhouette of his father.
No, I mean, they do a good job at like making this.
Well, I mean, it's kind of actually it's a little bit too easy because none of these zombies seem that easy to manhandle as the show goes on. But suddenly, seemingly, they're able to just silently and immediately restrain the king and get him back, take him out of the palace or wherever they go, because the crown prince then cannot find him.
It almost feels like they do, like, sort of what happens with the king becomes more and more intense, like, because at first because like you would imagine, given that he killed the assistant kid, that he would have killed the doctor as well, had it been like, okay,
they can get into a body when they're like just working on one corpse.
Maybe, but I guess I just thought maybe it seems as if he gets more and more horrific to the point where like, and they were like, okay, I guess now we need to chain him up now. I would have thought that point would have come before, but clearly not. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, they do manage to restrain him pretty quietly in a strange way. And then, of course, the king's counselor is like all in the prince's business. And like, oh yeah, you're being.
He's like, I saw
so
a monster
creepy
here tonight too. It was a son who looked like, who thought, made it seem like he was interested in his father, but really he wanted to kill him. It's like, wow, dude, you're such a jerk. And that guy does a great job of playing this jerk. He's so annoying and evil. And he's even mean to his other fellow counselors, especially the one who is sympathetic to the scholars. They have a council meeting where he bashes this guy's head into the table. And nobody, it's like he clearly is ruling without any equal, as the king's lead counselor. And it's a problem for the kingdom, I would say. So episode 2, we launch with Crown Prince and Mu Young, his bodyguard, are heading to Dongnei to find Doctor what's his name, and we've got the cavalry. Several armed guards the royal guards have been sent out to find them. They know that they're heading to Dongnei because they went and interrogated some of the peasants that the Crown Prince had spoken to, and they say in like a voiceover, we're gonna send the cavalry, and then we're going to send another troop of soldiers, and between those guys, they're going to bring him back, and that kind of sets up the action for the next several episodes in a cool way.
Yep.
And this episode, we also get introduced to the magistrate of Dongnei, whose name I think it's Cho Byum-il.
Yep.
I'm not sure about that.
And he is just like they basically make him just this horrible.
He's like, funny though. He's a funny bad guy.
He's funny, but they definitely make him into this clueless, self-preservation wuss.
He's just always slack-jawed and kind of, he either looks happy beyond belief or terrified beyond belief.
Right, and he has like this sort of cadre sycophants around him, who are always telling him how great he is, but they are also equally like just all about their own self-preservation, as we see later. But he, he definitely, he is also a piece of comic relief.
It's like his first day as magistrate or governor or whatever he is for this region when the Crown Prince and Mu Young have discovered all these bodies at the hospital. And this has happened without any exposition for the audience, where all these bodies are packed under the buildings at the hospital. The Crown Prince and Mu Young bring in the local militia to help out. The militia then bring the bodies back to the city of Dongnei, and then the magistrate or governor is informed that they're there. There's lots of really funny scenes in a way of him reacting to their presence and being like, "Oh man, not on my first day! What the heck?"
Right. And I mean, the interesting thing with this is that, so we know that these are all the people from the hospital. Yeah. They've all been kind of tied together into this whatever thing. And, this is the one sort of plot hole, which I think sort of gets explained later. But my thing is why not just destroy them all when you had the chance? And I kind of feel like Yunshin and Shobi should have been able to do this.
The amount of work that's obviously been done at the hospital took days and days, right? And they know by the time they are able to relate their experience, they're like, no, they're not dead. They're going to come back to life. But yeah, that's a very good point. They had the opportunity to at least kill some of them.
Right, and I understand why they didn't burn them, because that is like a big no-no in terms of funeral things in this particular culture, and also desecrating the body is a bad thing. So I can sort of understand it, except that Yunshin and Shobi know what these things do, and they do know how to kill them. Or how to make them not come back. So I'm kind of like, this is the thing, and obviously there wouldn't be a story if they had done this, but I'm kind of like, you at this point could have contained this whole dang thing, and they don't. And so instead, but it is interesting, and okay, we'll jump over that part, but with the magistrate and everybody pulling these bodies out, and the Crown Prince, they separate them all. They put them on these like funerary mats and cover them up. There's like a lot of respect shown to them. They're each individual, they just don't know what has happened to them. And they're horrified that this is the way somebody would treat these corpses. Obviously, Yunshin comes under suspicion because he's been running around with spears and stuff, I guess.
People have seen him collecting bamboo from all over the area.
Yeah.
So as soon as he finds out that they're not at the hospital anymore, he runs to Dongnei to be like, you're looking for someone, it's me, I didn't do it, but I witnessed everything, and they're going to come back to life. Right. And he tries to burn them, and it's actually really, these are good scenes, and I like the fact that the Shiobi comes and tries to do the same thing, and they both get thrown in jail.
And she's been found by the Crown Prince and his bodyguard, because they want to know about his dad, the king, obviously, and she's one of the only survivors and worked with the doctor. So they kind of come in just where Yunshin is like setting everything on fire, and it's so fun. Like, they do a really great job of presenting Yunshin as like the Cassandra. Not only is he the Cassandra where nobody believes the truth that he is saying, but they're also like, oh, you're the one responsible for this all, and he's really like. And then they blame him when they do come back to life, which is amazing. And this is a great scene too, with the bodies when the sun goes. So this is the difference in sort of like this zombie folklore, is that during the day they are inert, and at night they come in they're their bad zombie selves. But this whole sort of panic scene is amazing.
Well, we don't get to that, unfortunately.
I know.
By the end of episode 2,
it's hard not to talk about it.
We just have that great scene of the
ending guy, where the one guy's like, I think I saw one of them move. But that's how they.
And then the one woman gets up and she does start to attack. They do start to attack everybody right at the end of the episode.
Right.
But so Shiobi and Yunshin get put in jail. He breaks out of jail by running through a bunch of doors. Including like he throws himself against a jail cell door, and it like falls off its hinges, which makes me wonder how this prison jail cell ever held anybody. And then he runs through the next door and jumps out. I thought that was kind of funny and weird. I didn't know why they had him running and jumping at doors and they were all just collapsing. But hey, if that's what works for you. But this episode ends, we've got Xiaobi is just stuck in jail, which is maybe a good place to be. The Crown Prince and Mu Young are... The Crown Prince has gone back to the hospital and is confronted by the son of the chief counselor, who is also a captain of the Royal Guard and kind of the main antagonist for the first 2 episodes. And this is where we kind of see the Crown Prince. He's got backbone. He's kind of had Mu Young doing all of his not dirty work, but like interacting with people, fighting occasionally. And this is the first time where we get to see him. He has a sword, which you're not always sure if he does. And but he has his own sword. He draws it. He's like, I'm going to fight you, and I'm the chosen one. He even refers to himself as that, which is a little bit crazy. Yep. But, he's still working his way down from the mountaintop, as it were, into a folk hero. And they have a cool fight scene. There's a couple of other royal guards there, but then the sun goes down. And, and the physician reanimates in like some wardrobe and joins the fracas, and
yes,
it has a pretty good ending to that scene. I liked it. I thought that was a really good, between the 2 royal guards, the captain jerk from the Cho-Hae-Wan clan, and the Crown Prince and the physician's zombie. Man, I just love this show. This is why.
I think that the really great thing about that particular scene is so the focus is first upon this issue between these 2 characters. There's no love lost between them. This is the King's Counselor's son. And, he clearly thinks that the Crown Prince is like a usurper, and also there's a bit of a classist thing, like he's jealous of him. Definitely. And, doesn't really think he's actually going to fight. So he seems a little bit surprised when he says he'll fight. And then he's like, all right, sure, I'll take you down.
Because the captain of the guard has been cutting people's heads off all since the beginning of the show.
Right. Like he's pretty, that he can do it and he doesn't care about doing it. So, okay. And then when they get into it and it looks like all's lost for the Crown Prince, suddenly they throw in the zombie action and the whole dynamic changes. Yeah. And they just don't know what they're dealing with. And, you see them, you see multiple times, like the physician gets run through by the sword, but that has no effect. He gets one of the other guards. There's just an utter shock, and the whole dynamic of the fight changes. And ultimately, the prince is the one who kind of
takes care of business.
Figures it out. Yeah, he takes care of business. There's another guard that just runs like a big coward. Though honestly, you can't really blame him given what's happening.
It's bad that he gets away too, because I'm pretty sure he's the one who gets word back to the capital eventually that the son is dead. But it's great to see.
But he dies, I think. Killing the messenger really is true here, I think. So
yeah, seeing the captain of the guard, Cho-Hae-Wan guy, lose his cool too is great, because he's been really just impassive and just a murderous, cold murder machine. But then as soon as the zombie gets introduced to the scene too, he's like, oh, he kind of freaks out a little bit. He's not cool with how things are going, and he dies in a really ignominious way. Like he gets bit on the back while he's trying to fight the zombie.
And you see the teeth marks. You're like, oh, we know it's coming now.
And the transmission is really fast from the bite.
Yeah. And so, but I just think that the sort of shock and surprise, these actors are fantastic. The Crown Prince, Yi Chang is so great. Mm-hmm. He really he does a phenomenal job. I also think that the fight choreography is very cool. They have a controlled chaos to this.
It's a tight space,
it's a tight space. They use the sort of the things around them, not in a Jackie Chan sort of way, but just in a way that it's kind of like there and just thrown into the mix. So I thought that this was phenomenal. And then they flip back to the whole the scene with, I think that body's moving with the other group of people. Yeah. So it's good. And this series, as I said, we both originally agreed to just talk about these first 2 episodes, and we're going to leave it there with this particular Reanimated.
But we couldn't stop watching. We finished the series. I binged it hard.
Yep, me too. And it's fun and it's well done, and I'm all on board with this series. Really, and I'm a huge fan of martial arts films and samurai films, and in fact I'm going to see Lady Snowblood tomorrow night. They're doing a showing at Alamo Drafthouse here in Brooklyn, and that's the sort of inspiration for Kill Bill, for the Lucy Liu character in Kill Bill, and that whole scene it just reminds me so much of a little bit of what we were seeing in The Kingdom, that just attention to detail and having these like really cool characters in a period piece. Come on. Can't obviously that's a Japanese film versus a Korean film, but like this was right in my wheelhouse in terms of things I love.
Yeah.
So,
well, we're gonna be back for the utter destruction of Dong Ne next time,
yes,
and the episode after that. And these are really good episodes. They show, like total chaos, total horrific destruction, and an attempt at recovery. And so we'll get to that when we come back on Reanimated. Hey guys, don't listen to this if you haven't seen Kingdom yet, because we're gonna spoil the hell out of it. Here.
Yes.
So join us again next time when we get into episodes 3 and 4 of Kingdom. And in the meantime, let us know what you think about it. You can email us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. We're on the internet at reanimatedpodcast.com for our show notes. And you can also tweet at us at reanimatedpcast. Any other parting words, HA?
We'll work on our Korean pronunciations for next time, I suppose.
I can't promise that.
So,
I'm sorry.
I can't promise anything, but I will work on it. But until next time, ciao.
All right, bye.